To all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SDG Investment Forum. Prime Minister of the Democratic Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, and all other distinguished institutions chose to co-design. We also welcome our partner institutions that have joined us. The institutions are the Sampath Bank, joining as a technical partner. Through the investments that they do offer the global market, Sri Lankan market, and that is a role that the UN Global Compact.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Sanda Ojiambo, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and CEO of the United Nations Global Compact, representatives of the Principles for Responsible Investment and the UNEP Finance Initiative, investors, chief investment officers, and chief financial officers joining us from across the Asia Pacific, Excellencies, friends and colleagues. I'm really pleased to be able to join you today, this morning, at the SDG Investment Forum as part of Forward Faster, now Asia Pacific 2026. I'm very appreciative to the United Nations Global Compact, its country network in Sri Lanka, and the Principles for Responsible Investment, the UNEP Finance Initiative, and the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka for bringing together this coalition of investors, enterprises, and international institutions. As we all know, a fundamental principle of the SDGs is that governments cannot deliver sustainable development without the mobilization of all stakeholders. They require coordinated capital and policy alignment between governments, business, institutional investors, and civil society. Today, that principle is an economic necessity. Sustainable development represents a strategic blueprint for structural transformation, productivity, and long-term competitiveness. The scale of the financing requirement is significant. Developing countries face an annual SDG financing shortfall between US dollars to 2.5 trillion and US dollars 4 trillion. In Asia and the Pacific, the annual financing gap stands at approximately US dollars 1.5 trillion. Furthermore, United Nations assessments indicate that the Asia Pacific region is at risk of missing 88% of measurable SDG targets by 2030. 103 out of 117 targets. With less than 4 years remaining to achieve the 2030 agenda, the speed and scale of capital deployment must increase. For Sri Lanka, this conversation and this gathering comes at a very pivotal moment. Following a period of economic disruption, Sri Lanka is moving from stabilization towards structural renewal. Our objective is to build an economy that is resilient, competitive, inclusive, and sustainable. In 2025, Sri Lanka's GDP grew by 5% to approximately US dollars 108.8 billion, with GDP per capita exceeding US dollars 5,000. However, economic recovery alone is not enough. Growth must translate into tangible security, quality jobs, better livelihoods, and it must also be equitable. Our strategy focuses on achieving core sustainable development goals, including SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 16 on peace and justice and strong institutions, and SDG 17 on partnership for the goals. Also, an important consideration for our government in realizing these goals or meeting these goals is the recognition of unpaid care and domestic work that disproportionately burden women. We are therefore embedding a strong gender lens across achieving these goals. Dismantling structural barriers that limit women's participation outside the domestic sphere, whether it is culturally, socially, physically, or politically, is a huge concern for our government and something that we are focusing on. Furthermore, as a country, as an island that is right in the center of climate change and the risks ensuing risks, this is also environmental sustainability is also a major concern for us. As a government, we recognize that partnership with the private sector is important for transforming the economy. This is why this conversation, this dialogue that is taking place over these few days is extremely important for us. We want the private sector to do their business. You know how to do that well. And as a government, we want our role we think is to support you to expand and grow and contribute to the nation's economic growth, to job creation, and for creating opportunities. But at the same time, we don't want just any kind of private capital. We want private investment, capital that is also aligned with us on principles and values. In that regard, compliance with the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact and the integration of ESG criteria in a company's strategic plan is becoming crucial for ensuring that companies such as these fulfill their basic responsibilities to people and the planet. These include companies that will include and ensure compliance with some of the key UN conventions that protect our collective humanity from exploitation. We want you to pay your employees a living wage, invest in the professional development of your workforce, pay your taxes, of course, I'm sure our central bank will agree with that. Ensure that you comply with environmental and social protection regulations. We also would like to see you work with us on ensuring our economic growth is inclusive, that you work with us in actively seeking out sections of the community, of our community, that have been historically marginalized, whether based on gender, ethnicity, language, disability, or geographic location, and work with us to make sure that no one is left behind in our journey towards not just recovery and stability, but progress and development. The regional investment landscape, as we all know, faces systemic challenges. Climate change severely threatens the Asia-Pacific region, directly impacting agriculture, coastal infrastructure, and energy security. Risks that disproportionately burden women and vulnerable communities. With extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and climate shocks growing in frequency and intensity across our region, climate resilience is no longer optional. Facing these climate shocks alongside high capital costs and tight fiscal budgets, this transition cannot be managed by government on its own. The world looks unstable, whether because of war and conflict or rapid technological changes. Yet, we cannot wait for all of these to be resolved or for us to have all the answers. This is where innovation, adaptability, and resilience is important. As the government, we can work on creating the right conditions for you, but understanding the landscape and context within which you have to operate is also extremely important. In May 2025, the Central Bank launched the Sustainable Finance Roadmap 2.0 to align the financial sector with climate resilience and social inclusion goals. Implementing Sri Lanka's nationally determined contributions up to 2030 requires an estimated US $10.85 billion, underscoring the need to mobilize private capital alongside public resources. Furthermore, our green finance taxonomy and the Colombo Stock Exchange's GSS Plus bonds regulatory framework provide clear market standards for green, social, gender, and blue bonds. Capital must directly serve the real economy, and the real economy is based on people. It must fund competitive businesses, enable climate-resilient agriculture, secure clean energy, and drive digital transformation. Economic resilience also depends on protecting natural capital. Sri Lanka's marine and terrestrial biodiversity offer vital opportunities for nature-based solutions and for the blue economy, safeguarding food security and coastal livelihoods. Furthermore, we are dismantling access to finance barriers for micro, small, and medium enterprises, youth entrepreneurs, and early stage impact ventures. By offering gender responsive credit facilities and reducing collateral hurdles, we empower MSMEs as the primary engine of employment and innovation in Sri Lanka. Finally, long-term capital deployment demands accountability. Standardized impact metrics, gender disaggregated data, and clear disclosure standards are essential to prevent impact washing, verify real-world SDG contributions, and maintain investor confidence. Achieving these goals depends entirely on SDG 17. Governments must provide policy, stability, investors must bring capital and operational expertise, and development partners must mitigate risk, must help us to mitigate risk. On a final note, to every investor in the room looking for your next success story, our doors are open, our policy pipeline is ready, and we promise Sri Lanka is a much better place to deploy capital, preferably today, before your competitors beat you to it. Sri Lanka is ready to partner with long-term capital aligned with structural renewal, environmental integrity, gender equity, and inclusive growth. Despite the doom and gloom and uncertainty prevailing in the world today on multiple fronts, we truly believe as a government that our region is ready to take on these challenges and move forward faster. I also think Sri Lanka offers a story of hope and optimism. The strength of our story is because we want to define success not just by economic numbers, but by the impact we have on improving the lives of all of our peoples. That our decisions and choices are shaped not just by numbers, but also by principles and values. This is an opportunity to offer a different model of success and development, and we want you all to be part of that journey and that story. I thank the UN Global Compact, our co-hosts, and all delegates for your leadership and for your partnership, and I wish this forum every success. Thank you very much, and I wish all of you a very productive day. Thank you.
As we gather here today, as the Prime Minister has said, we want to look for action today, not tomorrow, not in the future, because the opportunity truly stands now. I want to start by just reflecting on some words from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently at the London Climate Action Week. This was in June. Secretary General highlighted there are multiple crises that are threatening both the public and the private sectors worldwide. The climate emergency, the energy crisis, and the financing crisis. And we call the financing piece a crisis simply because we know there's actually no shortage of capital around the world. The challenge is that capital exists in places where it is underutilized, underinvested, underemployed, and perhaps not leveraging the opportunities that the Prime Minister has highlighted, and certainly the investment opportunities of the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that at the moment, as has been mentioned, the shortfall to finance the SDGs is about $4 trillion, yet about $22 trillion sits in the hands of the owners of private capital. I think the question ahead of us and the opportunity is how do we direct capital to where it is needed most, where it can give the highest return of investment, but also where it can transform not simply balance sheets or economies, but the lives of the people that capital really should serve. We all know the impact of the last couple of years. We feel it, conflict, still dealing with the adverse outcomes of the COVID pandemic, the climate crisis, and the high cost of capital. All of those can be seen as extreme challenges. But the other thing is we all know what the solutions to that are, but we do need concerted and collaborative action. Our task really is to make this period of resilience building and recovery as short as possible, but also as forward-looking as possible. The business case for recovery is truly undeniable in many ways, and I really do thank the Honourable Prime Minister for highlighting that we must go beyond simply looking at GDP and the metrics, but looking at what it means to be living in this time, what is important to citizens and to people. It's the guarantee of a roof over your head, a living wage, that there's gender equity and parity, that young people can go to school, meet their aspirations in this rapidly changing digital world. And certainly governments can do it, they can create the enabling environment. I think the real task is on the private sector and investors to make sure that we fulfill our role in putting capital where it is needed most. There's a number of very clear business cases to support this. We do know that clean energy investment is reaping much more and faster returns as much as fossil fuel. In the last year alone, investments in this area realized a benefit of $2.3 trillion. Yet at the same time, we know subsidies towards the fossil fuel industry are much stronger, much faster. We simply need that shift to invest where we know the return on investment will be higher. Looking at the issue of transition finance, we know that mobilizing transition capital in emerging markets is not simply a technical challenge of financial engineering or carbon accounting. We know that we need to build trust across sectors. We know that we need to align risk and return expectations between public and private capital. We also know, as has been said, we need transparent but accountable frameworks to give investors confidence, meeting the practical realities of emerging economies, but also meeting that accountability need of the public sector. This multi-million-dollar funding gap across Asia-Pacific will require, as I've said, targeted collaboration across leading businesses, commercial banks, institutional investors, development finance institutions, and policymakers. And dare I say, also count on the United Nations, and really my colleagues from the Sri Lanka country team are here to work alongside all of you on this journey of resilience and recovery. Some practical examples, at the UN Global Compact, we have a coalition of CFOs and investors for the SDGs. It brings together corporate finance leaders around a shared ambition to build a $10 trillion market for SDG finance by 2030. Together with our friends and colleagues from the Principles of Responsible Investment, PRI, and the UNEP Finance Institution, UNEP-FI, we recently launched a new playbook for business-led blended finance. Because for too long, blended finance has been designed primarily without the collaboration and the trust building that is needed between governments, development finance institutions, and private sector. Bringing us all together to design deals earlier can help build that trust, create investments that are both commercially viable, developmentally focused, and have the social impact right at the heart. So today's dialogue provides this trusted space to move beyond high-level pledges and confront the real operational dilemmas of transitional finance, blended finance structures that make sense, credible transition pathways to de-risking capital flows, and supporting the immense opportunities that Honorable Prime Minister has laid out. It's been really an honor to be with business leaders from this region and specifically from Sri Lanka over the last couple of days. They are all very clear, Madam Prime Minister, about the immense opportunities that lie ahead for Sri Lanka and the region. Asia-Pacific is truly the region where the net zero transition will ultimately be won or lost. The leadership that you show here can help set the benchmark for capital markets worldwide. I know we have an ongoing technical discussion. We note that the Network Sri Lanka will also launch a one-year sustainable finance implementation work plan later today. And the diversity and the strength of the partners supporting this work plan will drive optimism for the next stage of Sri Lanka's sustainable finance journey. Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister, for your time. And to all of you gathered here today, I also wish you a productive forum and look forward to seeing strong, practical partnerships that emerge. Thank you very much.
Look here, smile.